In the stairwell of the Western Kentucky University Teacher Training School, which we both attended, he would have been in probably 4th grade and I would have been in 3rd. We met in the stairwell because we bumped into each other, and instantly, like little dogs, we were like, you know, because he was a big kid. I was a little kid, but I stood up to him. That was about it for years. We were aware of each other off and on, but we didn't become close until we were teenagers and there were guitars and girls and the Beatles. Then we got very close. We both played in high school orchestra. He played violin, I played trombone, and then our own, on the side, our guitar group, and eventually electric. We went electric and became a cover band and played fraternity dances and that sort of thing around Bowling Green, Kentucky. John was an incredibly prolific creative force. He was writing novels and drawing comic books, and it was bursting out of it, making little movies. John had a vision. He knew what a film director was. I'd never even thought about that. It's like movies would just sort of magically appear on the screen, and I had never given much thought as to how they got there. But he had given it a lot of thought and had decided that's what he ultimately wanted to do. And I helped John because he was trying to figure out where to go to do this cinema thing. He'd been unaware of this big, thick book you could look through at the library, the big blue book of colleges. He finally settled on USC as being the one he wanted to go to. And so off he went, and we corresponded, and he wrote these glowing letters about what was happening in Southern California and walking down Sunset Boulevard and peeking in and seeing the Doors performing, and it was just like, oh man, I got to have me some of this. So I got accepted to graduate school at USC during spring break of my senior year. So out I came, kind of following him.
Dark Star.
The first one I worked on was the first one he did, which is called Dark Star. It started out its life as a student film, and he and Dan O'Bannon were heavy collaborators on that movie. And they sort of just stood up and walked out of USC with it and made a deal and expanded it into a feature film. So I was in on all of that. At that time it was Scotch tape and chewing gum on the weekends out of the trunk of the car kind of filmmaking. But we did spend several days, maybe a couple of weeks, in a soundstage up in Hollywood, an old rickety dusty soundstage full of ghosts and history, expanding it, making it into various passages of the original student film. The best thing about the best student films is that everybody helps and everybody's doing 10 things, and that spirit, that way of filmmaking really lasted in John's career through the movies I helped him on, which were Dark Star, Assault on Precinct 13, Halloween, and The Fog. Dan was just one of a kind. He and John matched each other in terms of intelligence, creativity, ego. They were big personalities, and in any event, they went in 2 separate directions, which left John looking for someone when Assault on Precinct 13 came along. He certainly needed someone from the art department world to figure out these sets and all of that. That's where I stepped up, because John certainly enjoyed working with people he was already familiar with. He just, I think, instinctively started forming an ensemble group of familiar faces and friends with whom he felt comfortable and confident. And so, and also this factor of inviting friends who may have to work to step up to the task, who may not be fully qualified. speaking of myself, but who would learn fast, and because they're being given a marvelous opportunity, would rise to the occasion and give more than 100%. I think that was certainly a lesson I learned in the John Carpenter School of Filmmaking. I know one of my levels of excitement about Assault on Precinct 13 was we were working with 35 millimeter film. It was like big boy film. Look at that. Just that alone was exciting, and there was a magic that went with that for me it lasted several films, but what wears off is not really getting adequately paid for the things you're doing. Everybody was in it for the experience, for the excitement, and it was an exciting thing to be a part of, truly exciting. A great lot of the script takes place in a police station, and it was a foregone conclusion that would almost certainly need to be a set. That we might have gotten away with a location if we were just going to spend a lot of time in there, huddled together or something, but we were going to blow that thing up. So the set was the big thing, and it was a complex set consisting of a big central room, 2 side rooms, plus a basement. If you recall, in the movie, the climax occurs down in a basement corridor. So that was the first responsibility. I didn't really know what the scope of my responsibilities were, so I assumed anything that is visual, anything that appears on screen, is going to fall within my purview. And I proceeded with that in mind. Right there on the same lot that we had shot pieces of Dark Star on, we decided to use that as our set location. Right there on the lot, there was a company that was, it was called Get Set, and they were in the business of building sets custom for people and, making a deal and coming up with a finished set. Well, we couldn't possibly afford Get Set, except they were between bigger jobs, and the guy was paying his union crew to hang around, his paint department and his carpenters. And so we talked several times, and he finally said, look, I'll just do this for cost, just to keep the doors open. So we got this incredible break on a beautiful set that was all pro. And of course, in the bargain, I learned enormous amounts about the inside goodies about set carpentry and set painting and all the rest. It was a real adjunct to my film school knowledge. And what we got out of it was this brilliant set that we just shot the hell out of. I mean, we just kept going and going and going until we destroyed it. But it owes a lot to John's love of Howard Hawks Westerns. It's particularly derivative, in a good way, of Rio Bravo. It contains these key scenes that are just a pastiche of sort of John's favorite scenes from various movies. There's a little to have and have not in there. The lighting of the cigarette and the throwing of the rifle across the room so that the guy can shoot the bad guys before they do any more damage, and all sorts of moments that are boiled down from various favorite movies. But at the very heart of it, John was thinking the idea of the Alamo, of course. The interior walls are a kind of, they almost feel like adobe archways. I had to fight because the guy's crying poor. The guy back at Get Set is saying, archways, no, that's expensive, that takes more time. And I said, gotta have it, gotta have it. By then, being old friends, even then, we'd developed a lot of shorthand language, so many of our conversations may have just been indecipherable to a passerby because it was half of a sentence and it was like, I know what you're talking about, I got you. There was a lot of that. John was extraordinarily motivated beyond anyone else that I've known before or since just about, had a singleness of purpose about directing. And so you better believe he was extremely well prepared. The best thing any director can do is show up on the set with a shot list. It means you've thought about this. You're not going to just wander around going, maybe we should, no. Maybe later when you've got tons of experience, but in the beginning, be able to just turn to everybody and say, this is what's next. Or even just show the first AD that, and so they can say, this is what we're doing next. And he was all about that. I think he enjoys a lighthearted set, a little bit of joke around, a little bit of playfulness, but it's so the work can get done without it being like an army camp or something. And I think he was very effective in that regard. He had a lot of weight on his shoulders, but he wore it fairly lightly. Thinking about it, it went amazingly smoothly. The problems were always not enough time, not enough money, but those get sort of built in and you live with that reality. There were no disaster stories. No one got seriously injured. There were a couple of close calls. I remember Deborah Hill was the script supervisor on that movie, and we had guns on the set that were shooting blanks, of course. But one of those went off very close to her head, and anybody who knows about blanks knows that they too can be dangerous because they usually shoot a little wad of stuffing that comes out at high velocity, and people have been known to be seriously injured by that. So, Deborah almost got it, and I think her ears were ringing for a couple of days, but nothing of any significance that stopped the show or caused us to have to rethink. I thought there were so many sort of gutsy things going on, like it's killing Kim Richards. It didn't seem like there was any safety net. It was like part of the story, and it was going to be hard to cut around that. But I thought, man, isn't somebody going to raise their hand and say, wait, you can't do that? And no, nobody ever did. So that was that. I was, like John, coming out of USC, and so I was accustomed to taking a film from its first idea and first little bits of scratching on paper right to the mix, right to the release, right to the answer print. And so I was a little bit at 6s and 7s when we finished shooting. It was like, well, okay, the parade went over there up into Sam Goldwyn Studios in a cutting room up there somewhere, and well, hey, now what? Because I was not a fully professional art director, production designer, I didn't move on to some other art direction, production design gig. I went to the cutting room and said, hey, John, what can I do? Let me do something here. And he said, well, can you cut sound effects? And without really much knowing what that job might entail, I went, yeah, sure. And that was about that simple. I became, first and foremost, I think I became company in the editing room. And another friend, another USC guy, came to help us out even more in support of me, because as it turned out, we had a big job on our hands getting the soundtrack pulled together. Gunshots. As it turns out, there is no, Walmart of sound effects. You don't just go down and pick up a few gunshots. You can certainly get some of those things on at what then was albums, record albums, but that gets old pretty quick, and those sounds, funnily enough, even to a layman's ear, they start sounding a little cliched. But as it turned out, an old friend, another USC Mafia guy named Ben Burt had been projecting so many of the films that came through USC for student filmmakers to watch, classic films. And people will probably recognize that name because Ben became a star in the George Lucas universe as a post-production sound effects guy. But during this time, he was still down there, I think, at USC. We visited him, and it turned out he had been collecting, when film is projected, the sound part of the film is on three, what they call stems: the dialogue, the music, and the sound effects. He had been very quietly recording the sound effect stem for every movie that went through there. And so he had organized a sound effects library, a beautiful sound effects library that was very heavy on gunfire, for example, And he shared all of this with us. Thank you, Ben. It had bugged me a little bit that so much of the budget was getting spent on the equipment, the Panavision show, the big lenses, the widescreen, anamorphic. But there we sat, and there was a bed sheet on the wall. And when that first image came up, and the ratio, the shooting ratio is 2.35, I believe, to 1. So a lot of movies are 1.85. It's about like this. And TV now is kind of somewhere in that realm. 2.35 to 1 is way more like this. It just goes on forever. And when I first saw it up there on the wall, this little movie, this little Scotch tape and chewing gum movie looked like millions. It just, oh my God, I suddenly got it. It was an inspiring moment. It was called Anderson Alamo for the better part of its life, and then it became The Siege for a while, and then it finally became Assault on Precinct 13 shortly before release. It was shown in a brief theatrical release on Hollywood Boulevard. A little bit sad because I don't recall there being any great crowd for it, and I don't think we stuck around. It was sort of a downer because here it's in a movie theater, that's thrilling, but then there was no poster. It was just like a cardboard thing with magic marker. And it was like, oh, it didn't feel so great. And it was evidently not that well attended. So it felt like, okay, arm yourself for disappointment because that's just the way it's going to be. Its initial release in the US, not too thrilling, as I recall. It was no giant hit. But shortly after that, somehow or other, it got a new life of its own in England, of all places. They got it. They completely got it. They got all the Howard Hawks. They got all of the love of traditional Westerns. And it was quite a phenomenon over there. And John became, I think that was the first time he really got some notoriety and became a kind of a star. The boy genius who's the great new hope of cinema and all that sort of thing, which I'm sure did him a lot of good. It seems like it was about a year later. John, now he had 2 films under his belt, and those were formidable calling cards. But still, I think he was trying his dead best to get, bigger movies, writing tons of scripts. He wrote one for John Wayne, actually, one called Blood River, which the Wayne Company bought. He wrote one called Black Moon Rising, car theft story of a car theft ring, with a hero, anti-hero kind of guy. And several others. he was marching around town trying to get an opening. And then Irwin Yablans, who had been part of the pickup on Assault on Precinct 13. As a matter of fact, I think he may have come up with the title. It was then being called The Siege. And I believe Irwin came up with the title and did the release. And so by this point, John and Deborah were a team, and I believe they approached Irwin, who presented them with the notion of a little idea about the babysitter murders, was what Halloween was originally called. And away they went. Looking back, I'm grateful to have been on board. That was a wild ride. It's not over.